Hello, friends! Thank you for coming and hanging out with us on this GM Roundtable all-around hangout to discuss one-shots. Want to give a great thank you and welcome to our guest GMs here. We have our classic now number of times on the channel friend, Zachery Renauldo here. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Good to be here. I'm excited to talk some one-shots with you fellas today.
Yeah. And then this guy, Liam, you may know from other stuff that we've been doing for a little while.
Yes. We are 3 game masters with commensurate equal levels of time running games.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's the important spectrum, though.
Yeah.
You know.
It is.
But it's gonna be fun. We're gonna have a bunch of questions and generally just chatting. So you'll be hanging with us. Thank you for that. But today is here because of our sponsor. It is brought to you by Elderbrain and their new Mindscape one-shot subscription. So for those who don't know, Elderbrain is a tabletop publishing studio on a mission to give dungeon masters the tools they need to run incredible games so you can spend less time buried in prep and more time at the table with your friends.
Hi, friends.
Their new Mindscape One-Shots is a monthly subscription service that delivers brand new, ready-to-play adventures straight to your inbox every month. Now we're talking like custom NPCs, detailed maps, original monsters, fresh player options like subclasses, spells, and magic items, pretty much everything you need to complete a 4 to 6 hour session with no prep required. So thank you so much to Elderbrain for sponsoring tonight's episode so that we can nerd out and share some tips and tricks and anecdotes with all of you. So right now, you can actually use the code CRITROLL at mindscapeoneshots.com to get 30% off any subscription tier and standalone Daggerheart adventure modules, but only through May 31st, so you gotta get to it now. But check it out, and let's go ahead and have a little discussion here.
I'm excited. I'm really excited to talk to both of you
You
about
say
one-shots because it's. I think too we have all we've played at different generations of kind of what a one-shot is and what it was, and kind of to be fair and frank, Critical Role and other kind of actual plays have changed the idea of what, a tabletop role-playing game is supposed to be played when, through the 80s and 90s. It's much more of what we see as like a CRPG now and much more XP-based and kind of go and loot a dungeon, and if you die, you die. Maybe think a little bit less about backstories. It might be a meat grinder. And now it's narrative focused, so to have a one-shot, how do you bring in players where it's like you have a narrative one-shot, but you also want to keep it a one-shot. Or maybe you want to bring it into a campaign, but, what's the point of that? So I think I'm very fascinated to see how you guys have. I'm leading this now, by the way.
No, thank you. I'm glad
this is mine.
Takes the pressure off me on this.
This is my thing now.
Thank you, Zach, for having me.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for being here. I've been wanting guests on the show for a while now. No, but I do want to see, because you guys have also played D&D before, the actual play scene was there and kind of watched it as evolved. And I don't know, how has that changed before and to what it is now? And was there a change for how you played it in, I don't know, the 90s and then later on? Or do you see it still as kind of the same?
Oh, I don't know what the shit I was doing in the 90s.
Right.
Back in the 90s, I was running a game and piloting an NPC around like a player.
Right.
I don't know. I feel like one-shots are whatever you need them to be in the moment.
Yeah.
At least, so I'm the filthy casual home game runner. I've run a number of one-shots on Critical Role, but most of my experience as a game master is home games now. I've run for my kids, I've run for family friends, and I've used one-shots both as like an onboard method, where it's like, we'll try this if you've never done it before, and maybe it will go on to other things. I've also done it as like a treat to friends who've never played or are not my regular group, and we get together just for a night. And ultimately, like, all this game has ever been for us, for me, certainly, is a way to hang out with friends. So I've done games where it's just, like one night, I know we're gonna be together for 5 hours and I wanna just have a fun standalone treat. And then other times where it's been sort of like a springboard to other things. It kind of depends on what your goals are.
I'd say it's a heck of a lot easier to get players for one-shots now than it used to be.
Yeah. I mean, that's always the biggest barrier to getting people together to play, especially a campaign. It's kind of nice. It's, in a way, it's almost a vetting process if you want to start a campaign with a group of players. To be like, oh, can you get together for a one-shot on Thursdays? And they're like, oh, I can actually. Thursday nights are free for me. And then you try to, start a campaign up, and you're like, well, you did say Thursday nights were free.
Yep.
Like vet them to get into the actual thing. But yeah, I don't want to say a vetting process is always the way I run a one-shot, but it is nice to be, if I'm making a world that I want to make into a full campaign and I take it very seriously and I homebrew everything, I do want players that have a certain capacity of taking it seriously as well.
Yeah.
I've run into a lot of players that I play a one-shot with them and they've derailed so much from just even playing for 2.5 hours, right? That I'm like, I can't bring you into a full campaign, I just feel like you'll either make it too much about you trying to make others laugh or kind of just like doing the thing that the problem player does or anything, and to see.
Or even just like a table vibe check. Because you can have players who have just very disparate concepts of the type of fun they're looking for. And none of it's like the wrong way to play.
Right.
But for the kind of game that you want to invest your time into, you might be like, maybe this isn't the right game for you. Maybe this isn't the right table. And a session 0 and a one-shot are very good ways to kind of scope that out for a long-run campaign. I also find it's a great excuse to, especially in the concept of people like Elderbrain, who provide you all the prep for you, to want to play a game but not have the time to invest in having to build so much. For a lot of, especially newer GMs, it can be a very daunting barrier of entry to be like, well, how much do I build? How much do I create? And what if they don't like it, or we only get to play this one time? Do they now invest all this time into something that we're not going to get a chance to play again? Whereas one-shots are a great way to just kind of take a snippet, to take a little bite of something and be like, I have a central theme, I have a quick story that I think will be a fun beginning, middle, end, and let's just have a good Saturday, I also find it's a great place to teach people how to GM.
Yeah.
A lot of people, when you're like, oh, you never GM before, but you're kind of curious about it, a campaign is a very daunting thing to cut your teeth on. But a one-shot is like, hey, you only got to worry about 4 to 6 hours, ish. And if it goes well, great. You can keep taking it where you want to go. If you're like, that was fun, I don't think it's for me, it's a very safe space to like kind of try things out and not feel like you're committing everyone to a 2-year journey if you're uncertain about whether or not this is something you're ready to really dive into as a GM.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think that's how I started running in not the 90s. That is a time forgotten. But more recently, and I started with my kids. Like I didn't really know how to do it. And I think we get asked all the time, like, what should I do to run games? Really, just pick up a book, read it a little bit, and start, and like learn by doing. And just taking a bite-sized chunk, which is what a one-shot is. It is like a single escape room experience, really around a table with either in your mindscape or with miniatures and terrain. And then if everyone wants to keep going, they will, or you've learned something and had fun for one night.
But I think to your question earlier, though, about how that's changed like over time, there wasn't a lot of context for how to get a table vibe back in the day. A lot of the history of tabletop games, and D&D in particular, was so steeped in the dungeon delve, in the chainmail, origins of the game. And it was more about the Diablo-esque, go to the next level of the dungeon, kill things, take loot, die to traps, keep moving forward, and that had its own fun. But as the genre of fantasy began to blossom into more narrative media on a cultural, like pop culture level, people began to seek to weave more of the narrative into it, and the actual like games themselves began to facilitate that more. And that crossover was hard to really gauge. You all kind of, people say like, oh, I play these games, and they'd all show up at the table with different expectations, and you just kind of had to riff and adjust on the fly. I think as time and the community has expanded, especially in recent years, the tools to prevent that sort of mystery at the table and that desperation of the GM to try and facilitate what they assumed people would want is a lot more dispelled, in the sense that people are having conversations about it and about the different play styles out of the gate. And there was kind of an unspoken, like everyone shows up and goes, entertain me, GM, back in the day, whereas I think now we're getting better about everyone coming to the table to have conversations about these expectations and allowing the GM to have this information to then tailor the one shot to match what they want. And that's kind of the thing too, is there's always been so much pressure on the GM to present and to build. I love that there's a lot more conversations about the player's responsibility to collaborate across the board and help build this together. And one-shots are a great space with these sort of conversations to take the information that's available, which is very codified as a toolbox as opposed to a written structure that you have to stick to. And then ask the players, like, okay, this guy wants to be more of a dungeon delve. This person wants to be very political. This person wants to just be silly. I have this toolbox of a one-shot to play with. Which parts can I emphasize more to facilitate this player's excitement? Which parts can I, emphasize more to facilitate this player's excitement? And what parts can I just get rid of entirely because I don't think they'll match for everyone's play style? And what things can I add to it because I'm really inspired about this one thing about it that I think everyone would be into? I like that's more of a thing now.
Yeah. I definitely don't have a frame of reference, because I started playing, around 2014, 2015, right when 5th edition kind of came out. And my frame of reference was just, kind of what I saw online and listening to the actual plays that I've already listened to. But I remember going to a game store here in Los Angeles, and it was a Adventures League, literally. You can just show up, you bring a character, you get thrown in. We were playing the Dragonlance book that came out in December a few years ago. And it was 2 or 3 people that came in with heavy role play experience. That is what they wanted to do. But there was one gentleman in his 50s who was also sitting at the table, and it was like interrupted us to be like, some of us want to finish the module. Can we stop role playing so much? You know what I mean? And it was like, to me, it was like flashbanged me. I couldn't believe it. I was like, what are you talking about? Like, go play a video game. What are you? I couldn't believe. But then I realized in that moment, people play this game so differently. They play any TTRPG so much differently. And so when I first ever tried being a DM, and that was before, that experience at Adventures League, I used a pre-built one-shot so that I didn't have to think about, stat blocks. I didn't have to think about balancing or like when a battle was supposed to come up. I could just think about what rules in the game do I need to think about when people are role-playing, when they're walking from one space to another. A thing that I had a problem with was when I didn't have a map. What do I say to shoe leather my players into the next spot? Do I say, well, you walk left, and then you walk right, and then you walk down an alleyway? That, for me, gave me points to realize, oh, this is what I need to work on. This is what I need to work on if I want to turn this into a full campaign. So
it's a great scaffolding to teach you the kind of things that facilitate the momentum of a story that you can then build off of or tweak to match your style. But to your point, if you have no experience with it previously, a large module can be very intimidating and also can leave you feeling like, well, I don't know how to run this whole thing. A one-shot is such a wonderful little bite-sized snippet to kind of teach you the most bare bones aspects of that. And if you have no experience or comfort in building on your own, be like, just use this. Just use this, and you learn through that practice on what places you end up improvising the most. And how to get back on track to the point where you're comfortable as a GM. And I think I guess you brought up an interesting question, having 2 or 3 players at the table and stuff like that. What is an optimal number of players at the table, you think, for a one-shot? If you're trying to shoot for a 3 to 6 hour window, where does it begin to break down on both sides of the spectrum?
I don't know if you'll agree. I'm interested to hear what you folks say. I say, for me, I think the optimal number of players for any one-shot, or any campaign really, is 6 players. I like 6 players, 1 DM. But I know a lot of people go, I like 3 players. I don't know if I totally agree with that. Believe me, it seems like
I think 3 to 6. I can work anywhere in there. And in fact, not a one-shot, but I recently, in the last year, ran sort of what ended up being a 3-shot. Which was separate because I have an ongoing campaign and someone wasn't available for a long time. So I'm like, well, let's fill the time with something else. It was also a great chance to lean into a totally different kind of game. My normal game has 2 really heavy role players in it. One person who's there to kick ass and is there for the yucks. Another, my cousin is in this game and he just likes to relax and have a good time. And then I've got an artist who's constantly drawing while we play and likes butt jokes. But the game is pretty dark and role play heavy. So for this, not a one shot, but a 3-shot, these games are like, it's like, I always think of it like rosary beads, right? You get a bunch of Hail Marys and then boom, you get to an Our Father. Like you got chapter, 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 and then a huge thing happens. And then, it's episodic drama. But for this game, I brought in some guest players and the people who are in town for this short run thing. And I think just because of combat, anything larger than 6 makes you're gonna blow past an evening.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, if you're playing, some systems are faster than others, but like D&D certainly going around, particularly in today's day and age, if you have players who like relish being really descriptive with their combat decisions or who are like not sure what to do and are like figuring out as they go, which is most of us, anything past 6 is going to bust you out over a night.
I can agree. Yeah, I say 4 to 6 is my sweet spot generally. Especially, I would say in the context of a one-shot, which is kind of the primary conversation here.
Right.
The more players you have, the longer it'll take. The more debate there is, the more conversation, the more moments, like spotlight moments the GM is offering the different players, the more narratives you're facilitating in it. And so when you get to 6 players, you're probably going to be running on the longer side of a one-shot. And I guess at that same point, what would you guys consider an optimal length of a one-shot?
I always have the thing, it turns into a 3-shot. I mean, if I'm running a one-shot, I don't say no more as a DM than when I run a one-shot, because it's, I will have players, can I check out this bar? And I know that will lead to them talking to the bartender that will then want them to run the bar. And then that turns into its own thing. And there's ways you can pivot and make it so that, people in the one-shot that happened in Lotus Island, you start in a tavern, right? And there are roadblocks as a DM where you have to be like, don't run this tavern, find where you need to go. And I have played in a lot of one-shots, but if I run them, it is constantly like, and the next thing happens, and the next thing happens. And you have to keep it going, because otherwise it turns into a 2 to 3 shot for sure.
Yeah.
That's the majority of
That's
what
very
happens.
key. Like the GM definitely, more so than a lot of other scenarios in a one-shot, you are very much the editor, director of this. In the sense you're paying attention to the pace. The minute that you're like, okay, we only have so much time to run this. Like for me, I'd say like I've run one-shots from 3 hours to 8 hours. And a lot of that is based on the size of the group, like we were mentioning, as well as just people's scheduling. And partway in, I'd say by about 1/3 in, the pace that it's going to go. You have your list of content you're expecting to get through, and if by hour 2, you're like, we're still at beat 1, you have to start thinking about editing what things aren't absolutely necessary for the story or what things you can start pushing through, and you have that power as the GM to guide that pace. And a lot of the times you begin to start thinking about, how can I push this forward? I feel like we're gonna run the tavern, we're gonna stay here. You're like, but now the tavern catches fire, or the manager says like, wait, who drank all the wine? Was it you? Right. Get out of my, and then push them forward on that narrative. Give them moments. You don't want to railroad them necessarily.
Right.
You want them to feel like they're still guiding the story, but you also want to introduce complications that propel the story momentum forward. And so it's good to also be aware of those options and little like nozzles to tweak as you need to.
Yeah, you got to be way more cognizant of a beginning, a middle, and an end. One-shot night is it's really like a genre theme party, right? Like you're either doing like a murder mystery or a temple exploration or a bar brawl. And because if you're in it for more extensive, let's find out where our collaborative storytelling takes us, which I'm not a fan of. No, you want a campaign, right? Like that's what the campaign is for. So for a one-shot, you're there for like, again, I liken it to an escape room. You're there to show up, figure out there's a story, and you're there to like solve a puzzle, whether that puzzle is like an intricate, weird fight or a literal like puzzle built into a temple. You're not there to, discover who you are as a person. There's just not enough time for that.
I think that's a part of the social contract, which is harder for newer players to understand of what a one-shot is supposed to be. It has gotten to the point where I will play with some of my friends who I've been playing for a while. I want to do a one-shot to try out some new mechanics, a new system, whatever. and they will intentionally be like, what's down the other road? And I'll be like, no, you can't do that, all right? And there's an invisible barrier, and I have to like jump out of my way because they will try to make it so that this one shot is not a one shot. And then, you can add a joke in there like whatever. A bird hits you and you flings into the tavern and boom, you're in there, right? And people can call that railroading and whatever. But I think there's a degree of a social contract in a one shot to be like, we have 6 hours. Usually when we play, that is like us saying hello to each other at the beginning, right? Yeah. We have to go through an entire journey by the end of that 6 hours. So we gotta.
And like with a campaign, you sort of like, it's best to like get what everyone's expectations are of what the game is going to be up front, including the game master. On the flip side of that, though, like when I am designing one-shots, like I've designed one-shots for here, and then like my Candela run, which was 3, I think of it similarly, again, like a 3-shot, but like I have learned from Travis Willingham deciding to attempt to murder Santa Claus at the end of a feel-good Christmas one-shot that I did, that you have to be ready for fucking anything.
Yeah.
And so I do spend time thinking about like, well, they're clearly going to want to go down that road, so what are like 2 little, like cat toys I can use to get them away from it.
Cat toys is the key. I was going to bring up like at certain important beats of the story, being very clear with the shiny jiggly ball. That's like, you want to go here. Players want to go where the interesting story is, and if you leave them to a space and go find the mystery, they're gonna wander off like the most uninterested cats in the directions you don't expect.
Yeah.
And so you have to kind of be a little upfront and a little showier than you might normally be about where the interesting story will take them, or they're likely to do that. And you don't want to, once again, prevent them from having fun.
Right.
And with experience, you get better at following where they're wanting to go, even if it's off where you expected, and dovetailing that with the story you're trying to get them. But for like newer GMs, you just want to lean into being very overt with where the story wants to take them.
Yeah.
That just comes with experience.
And yeah, because I've also played as a player. A lot of new GMs come around and they want to run a one-shot, and it's like, you start off and you are in the town square. And it's like, okay, well, and as a player, sometimes it's like, okay, I know we have a time limit and I know how this goes. Where's the story? Like, I want to figure out where that is as fast as I can so that we can progress through it. So I think that, the very fun thing about a TTRPG is you can do anything, you can go anywhere, but to have the shiny object, the cloaked person in the bar that looks mysterious, right?
Yeah.
Something that grabs the player's attention that they want to go to, that is the best way of directing people to kind of where they need to go, as opposed to just being like...
The sound of shattering glass, the scream off in the distance, or the sudden flash of bright red energy that, sends long shadows from a nearby, structure, but you don't know where the source was, Just signs that make people go, ooh, something's happening that I want to be a part of.
Yeah.
And you said earlier about like, getting the time of everyone spending, the first hour being like, hi, I'm this.
Yeah.
Another really simple and easy way to get onto the story quickly is having everyone decide on their relationships before you start.
Okay.
Avoid the you meet in a tavern and introduce each other.
Yeah.
You can also ask the players, who amongst you already knows each other, and what have you done before?
Yeah.
Do you already know each other? Are you already an assembled group of friends, or at least acquaintances? Have any of you dated previously? Are you broken up and there's tension and you're kind of forced in here? Just having a 15-minute conversation to let the players decide upon predetermined relationships means that you don't necessarily have to spend the first hour and a half of everyone talking about their character's backstory and introducing themselves to each other. And that's a fun thing if everyone's into it too. You don't want to deny that. But if also you are very limited on that time, if you're like, Chris has got to go by 6 p.m. and we're already at 2 o'clock, then that can really help everyone kind of jump into the story already with momentum, already a place to start building banter, and as opposed to going, hi, I'm Gerald the elf, you're like, hey, Gerald, it's been a minute. Hey, what's going on over here?
Right.
On that note, something I like to do, I've done it for one-shots I've run at home, and I do it for all the ones I run here, which is like, we don't have, so again, it's one-shot versus full campaign. So full campaign, there's time to be like, who are you? I don't trust you. I don't know you. We're feeling it out, but you don't have time. You need to get to the meat of the story for your one-shot. So what I like to do is I get any input from players in advance of like, well, we're sisters, or we hate each other, or I have a dark secret.
Right.
If there's even room for that, and then I like to write like an opening narration that pins us where we are in time, so that in the space of 5 minutes at the top of the game, I am narrating that these two are sisters, or that and where we are, and then I like to start us, excuse me, solving a problem right away, because I feel like, you come in, before you start any game, you have as a player, you have ideas of who your character is, but we really learn who the character is by playing the game. So rather than having the situation which you just described, which is like, we're in a tavern and I'm Gerald the elf and I come from a long line of, no, forget that. Instead, I put you on a boat that is in the middle of a storm and is in danger of capsizing, or I put you in the middle of a village and there's a ring of fire has broken out around you. And then the players are forced to like solve problems, and the way they interact with each other kind of reveals the character.
Yeah.
We have very different. My players, whenever I do a one shot, are just they're so unserious about it. Like they'll be like, yeah, I'm Muscle Man from regular show, and I go, okay, awesome, that's cool. Do you guys have any like problems or anything? They go, I didn't think about that at all, actually. Like I have no idea going into this at all, and I guess I just never thought that would be a problem.
Well, I'm not even thinking like it can be deep, but it doesn't have to be. Like I did Tomb of Horrors for friends recently too, and I told managing expectations. I said, like, this is a meat grinder. This is not like what we do today. That's going to be the fun we have here, is like, it's unfair. And you're going to get wrecked in here. And that's the fun of it. So they understood the assignment, and they created like a 70s, like Pink Floyd Walking Out in the Desert rock band.
Oh, cool.
So everybody was like there was a groupie, there was a rodeo, there was the lead guitarist. So it wasn't all deep and introspective.
Yeah. That's it at that point too. Muscle Man from regular show could be like, all right, well, I guess let's see what you do in a tavern. But also, what would Muscle Man do on the middle of a ship that's on the threat of capsizing in the ocean? It's still going to be a little silly, but also, he might die. What are you doing, Muscle Man? Are you starting to pull them sails up? What are you doing?
Yeah. I think that's a great point too. Like as a player, I love being able to go into a meat grind that I usually never do, right? And I play 7 different characters, right? And I know I can just do whatever ridiculous stuff that I'd never, like a pirate chef that, walks on his hands and whatever. As long as that is what the narrative is calling for, right? I'm not going to I probably wouldn't walk into a one-shot like this that has some narrative weight and things like that to be Muscle Man from regular show or whatever, right?
If that's what the player's into, that's fine. And then you just find a way where, like, down the road, like, Muscle Man's extremely weak, long-lost brother is like, you're the one who took all the muscle from us in the family. Give it back, And it's like,
oh, no, bro. That's so good,
I also think it's just better for players, because rather than saying like, all right, Muscle Man, we're stuck on Muscle Man.
All right,
Muscle Man.
Great show.
Muscle Man.
Chant sure shot. I'm sorry.
You're in a tavern, Muscle Man, and nothing is happening. Now talk about your feelings, or talk about who you are. So like, I mean, what are you gonna do? Like, yep, I'm a guy. I got muscles. Instead, the ship is spilling over. That you're holding on for dear life. There's a rope maybe you could grab, and Muscle Man gets to do all of that fun Muscle Man stuff, but in action.
Yeah, narrative urgency is definitely the name of the game if you want to finish a one-shot.
Yeah.
In the time that a one-shot takes. No time for introductions. Learn as you go is a great point, because, again, I don't have that problem as much, because my players are just like, they understand it because I've played enough with them.
Right.
But I know if I go into a game store and I grab 5 people, they'll probably want to start, I'm Gerald the elf, right? This is who I am. And I'd be like, no, you're on a boat and it's sinking and you got to figure it out right now. I think that's a great point,
It's interesting too, because like, you can also have like characters, make their characters and bring it to the table, or you can have pre-mades that people choose from. As a GM for a one-shot too, because you have such little time, but everyone wants to feel like they have a moment to shine. Taking a little bit of context, or even just taking 5 minutes before you start the session after everyone's picked their characters or made their characters, to be like, all right, y'all talk amongst yourselves, maybe figure out your relationships if you want to. I'm gonna go take a minute to review my material and consider beats through the one shot that each character can shine. If someone builds a character who is like the strong man of the group, where can you introduce a challenge that strength and that sort of physical force would be a very key way to circumventing the challenge? If somebody has an older arcanist who has long studied, like, where's a point in the story where they can really shine as the person that knows information about the world or the history around it? You know, just taking little beats that you can kind of give a note to yourself to let each player kind of go, wait, I'm the strong one.
Yeah.
I can save us with strength, and be like, yes, you can. Yes, you can. Let's roll, you know?
Smart. Yeah. That's the part of that's the stuff you can think about, especially if you use a pre-constructed module too. You don't have to think about, I told everyone last Saturday that this Saturday we're running a one-shot and I have nothing. It's like your notes and it's like bad guy, bad, question mark.
Yeah.
And you go into it now, oh, I have a pre-constructed module. I have a beginning, middle, and end, and now I can think about if my friend wants to be the strong guy, I can throw in something. You know, it takes a lot of the pressure off. Because in a way, yeah, you're performing for your friends, you're the GM. It's a lot of pressure when you do it for the first time. So having that structure like beforehand, because like you said, if you go into making a world, do I think about trade, especially if you've never done it before, do I think about trade routes? Do I think about, you know, the political infrastructure of these three kingdoms? Like you're writing a novel, right? Where nowadays you know, especially going into a one-shot, that's actually the biggest thing I do for one-shots is like, I want to try a new system and I want to do a new world that I think is cool. What would that look like? And I usually take that one-shot and I make it bleed over into what the main campaign would be. So I usually do different characters so that people can try a new system or a new class that they wanted to do. If they don't like it, it gives them a chance to change their character. But if they want to carry that character over into the new full-length campaign, they can do so. And I always like it. What I just did when I ran I'm running a Daggerheart campaign right now, and my one shot, I had it where they got into a fight and they damaged a guard bridge, or like a gate coming down. Okay. And then at the beginning of the adventure, like the actual adventure when we started, the problem is that the gate didn't go down and they got raided by bandits and whatever. And so they're like, oh, that's the thing we did in the one shot. And so it's cool to like narratively give them a taste of what this world is going to be like, what it's going to kind of look like, heavily narrative, or if it's going to be combat based or whatever. And so you can do this too with Lotus Island and going into kind of the Crown of Oathbreaker stuff where it has that full world, right? That's kind of how I use my one shots, is to, this is world and genre, because I've had it so many times. Liam, I don't know if you ever had this, all right? Where someone comes into their game, I'll be like, this is a steampunk grimdark world. Think BioShock Infinite meets Trench Crusaders. And they'll be like, I like dinosaurs, and I'm a dinosaur guy. I'm from Turok. And I go, oh, that's awesome. Oh, that's so good. And you have to like really try to, how do I, because it doesn't work, you know what I mean? And then that's a challenge as a DM I have in one shots too, you know? It's like,
it's just like, it goes back to managing expectations. And it's like, guys, it's like dating before getting into a long-term relationship.
That's
You're like figuring out, are we a right match? Do we have good chemistry? And I have an idea for a home campaign that I want to do, and I've started talking to family members and friends about getting to it when I have time. But I am telling people, like, if you guys want to play in this campaign, then I'm sorry, this isn't a one shot. I want no magic.
okay.
There's going to be no magic.
Yeah.
So when you're picking your classes in the system we use, I want you to like lean towards the ones, and that could be maybe something that could be negotiated later.
Yeah.
And that's all I'll say on that, is what I said to the players.
Yeah.
So like I have a family member who loves casters, because casters are rad.
Yeah.
And maybe this isn't the campaign that they want to be in.
Right.
So, you know, for your dinosaur player,
Yeah.
it depends on what you're doing.
Yeah.
It depends on what you're doing.
I mean, that's the thing about having it, even just like that idea be a one shot, right? To have no casters is, I think, because a lot of people get stuck on, you have a friend who's always casters, right? They like the versatility, they like the options, they don't like just swinging a sword and rolling a dice, right? To have a one shot where they can try something else, it's like, you know, in a video game system where a sword will break after you use it too much, because it wants to incentivize you to try the other mechanics inside of the game. Yes. It's like a one shot is that. It can be used as that, where it's like, I have a guy who always plays this wizard named Avishkar, and he has like 1,000 blog posts mentioning him, right? And he always plays that one OC. It's like, okay, well, this is a one shot where you're not that, right? Yeah. And they'll be like, yeah, it is, but it's an alternate dimension of them. But it doesn't matter. But I think that's what a one-shot really shines as well. Is like, okay, now I've played with you guys too long, and I'm going to give you guys a narrative challenge because I've done enough.
I love this because, indeed, players have been playing for a while. You kind of find the thing that you gravitate towards as far as gameplay, both out of comfort, but just also loving. Some players love having that utility, and it leads them away from classes that on paper seem like they're much more limited. But in this instance, you force them to start realizing how much more creative you can be with those limitations. Sometimes limitations breed more creativity. You're not relying on the rote system. The limitations force you to be creative in that space. And so, yeah, my guy has a sword. Cool, what can I do? I do damage with it. It's like, well, then you start asking questions like, well, in this bar brawl, you know, is there anything in the rafters that's suspended by rope? I'm gonna go ahead and try and cut the rope and ride it across the way to get there. Okay, well, looking in this general area, is there anything in the environment that looks like it could be easy to damage if it was forced heavily enough? Or does this look like this material here is easy to cut that is, you know, holding this massive sculpture for the celebration that everyone's looking towards, you know? Like you start realizing how you can utilize at your disposal to do creative things that aren't just given to you in a toolbox.
Right.
And that honestly left me really appreciating my first time playing as a martial class. I played a dwarf fighter many years ago. It was the first time I ever did anything without magic. And I was like, I'm gonna challenge myself. And at first I was like, oh, I have a hammer. That's cool. But by the end it was like, I was jumping on and riding wyverns. And you know, the limitation can breed a lot of interest, and the one shot is such a perfect space to like teach that and be like, you're not having to go into a long-term relationship with this character yet, but I want you to just try something different out of your comfort zone and then find the fun and appreciation in that space.
Yeah, one shot is like a lab, really, with it allows you to experiment or explore so many different things, both as a game master for the kinds of games you run, be they like crunchy and combat heavy, or intrigue, or discussion, or light and fun, and then as players trying different systems, and like that's another thing. It's like, am I gonna like sign on for a whole new system for 5 years? Well, just sit down and I'll walk you through for 5 hours while we have, you know, Mr. Pibbs and Cheetos. You can try it. You can try systems, characters, genre, without the pressure, because like if you don't like it, then the end of the night it's done.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you know what I've done actually for a one-shot before is the last campaign I ran was this grimdark steampunk adventure. And what I wanted to do is the players got to level, I think it was like 16. I wanted to do the first one that was level 1 to 20 in D&D 5th edition. And what I did was near like the third arc, we're deep into it, they're level 16, is I ran a one-shot during when we would usually play the regular game, where they were all fantasy creatures, like a twig blight or like a toad, a sentient toad person, or you know, just some kind of like fantasy creature, and they're walking in through the eyes of a little girl who they know in the story is like a little girl who's missing in these deep dark woods, but in her imagination she sees that as like a fun trip or whatever. And I used that one shot to show how strong the characters were in the actual campaign. Because at the end, they meet a bunch of monsters in a unwinnable fight, which I don't encourage to put in like a cutscene, you know, so like, this is an unwinnable fight. But I had it to show kind of like the power scaling of the characters in the main campaign by doing a quick 3-hour one shot where they were half a CR, like creature, doing whatever. And that's the thing you were talking about, genre, where it was like, okay, you know what, things are a little dark right now, let's do like a funny little thing where you guys are very weak, and then you can also see how cool your characters are from the like a third person view, you know?
Yeah.
So, I don't know, I think one shots are the best place to just try whatever you can.
I will say too, on you saying like, yeah, I don't recommend doing an unwinnable fight. I think you can for narrative purpose as long as you are clear with the players.
Yeah.
But like, you know, after like one terrifying round or something that your opponents do, being like, go to the most tactically, you know, insightful character on that map and be like, you know, looking around you and the scope of what you're up against, a chill runs down your spine at the realization you run or you die. And then you turn it into a chase sequence, in which case, you know, the combat is over, but the threat finishes, and then that could be something to like, if it turns into a campaign to strive for down the road. But to your point, like, you have to be very clear with the players about that, because they're going to come under the assumption that every combat is balanced.
Yeah.
And it can be very unfair if you do that without being very clear.
That's the most frustrated I've seen players, is like if you add a combat that is, you know, but it's for a narrative beat,
purpose.
you know, But if you would just simply establish by saying, clearly the odds aren't in your favor, yada yada, to give them, oh, okay, I see what's happening, because, yeah.
I, a few years back, as a thank you to the writers from the Mighty Nine Writers Room, ran a one-shot for a group of our writers. And I was on a boat. I guess I love trying to kill people on boats. I also
like a childhood trauma, like a mariner uncle that took you on a bad trip.
I also own one of those giant boats. But I started them in a problem, and I put the combat at the top, actually, which I don't often do. And then so they came out, and the boat was overrun by fish folk. And then towards the end of it, the fish folk all started leaping off the boat, and a kraken-like thing swam up and started tearing it apart. The smaller enemies they were fighting fled, and then it was clear the thing I had a miniature was gigantic, and this was most of them their first game rolling dice ever.
Right.
So it became very clear that it was that this is a meat grinder, and you need to run away from it.
Cool.
And so the challenges were about jumping from safe spot to safe spot, getting on a smaller boat and getting the hell away to a nearby island.
On the topic of beats, because I think we've talked a lot about kind of the setup, the preparation, the benefits of module-based one-shots, and being able to take the cognitive load off of developing and instead just tailoring it to your interests. When you are plotting out a one-shot, even taking pre-written material or creating your own, what is the structure you follow generally? I tend to think of one-shots in narrative terms as like a movie. Mm-hmm. You have a 3-act structure, because you have a limited time to tell the story. What's the inciting incident? Finishing the act 1 with the reveal of information and the promise of possible danger, to the rise, to the climax, to the conclusion and denouement. That's a good structure to start with. What do you find is very useful for how you structure the narrative of a one-shot?
And that's got to be how it is, in my mind, for one-shots specifically. With full-blown campaigns, moments like that happen.
Yeah.
And games like that are run, but there's also just games where you're like, okay, you just finished this major impactful thing. I have no idea where you're gonna go. Anything could happen, and you just let it run.
Yeah.
But for one-shot, that's hard. So framing and structure are very important. And again, those cat toys to help kind of keep them in their Act 1, Act 2, Act 3.
Yeah, just the way I write one-shots, I just always make sure that there's a mystery, something new to be solved, clear direction and what needs to be solved next. But I follow kind of just the regular structure of, rising incident, all the way up to a climax fight, and then ending it there. I've played one-shots where it's you get to the final boss and it's now you gotta go back. And you're like, why do I have to do that? Kind of have it to where it's like a Skyrim dungeon, you get to the end and then you can instantly get back to the entrance. You know what I mean?
Right.
You're teleported out, you're instantly going to be back at the beginning. It's the pacing of it is just to be the next thing is here, and it's so clear to get there right away. It's constant action, not really any downtime. I think that's how I structure it. I just want to make sure it's almost like uncut gems. You have anxiety the whole time, what's gonna happen next,
I think that crescendo at the end, it is often combat, but it can be an information reveal, or if you're doing sort of a dinner party murder mystery and something's trying to be solved, and somebody reveals themselves at the end. It's just building towards its progression and a slow climb towards some sort of event.
Yeah, and allowing the players at least a beat in that conclusion to get in a final line, to bring it to the finale, and almost give it at least a beat for an epilogue, where the players can kind of kind of sit in the victory or failure, if it's fun and playful, to be and where does this sit as you all kind of look upon what has happened, and give them a moment to kind of finish their tale, that one shot, and kind of button it there is really fun. Speaking of buttons, I think this is a perfect spot for us to take a quick break to thank today's sponsor, Elderbrain, and their new Mindscape one-shot subscription. And honestly, it's pretty great. I mean, if you're a game master, or if you've ever wanted to be one, I think you're actually really going to like this. So as we mentioned earlier, Elderbrain's Mindscape one-shots, it's a monthly subscription that sends a complete ready to play one-shot adventure like we've been discussing here directly to your inbox every single month. Now, we got to take a look at one of their upcoming one-shots. And there's the Revelry at Lotus Island. And you can see some the kinds of unique story elements. We have some maps here. This is the obstacle course, which is part of the larger overall Lotus Island map here. But this one-shot package gives to you multi-dimensional custom NPCs, high-resolution maps such as these, and the table, unique monsters for this story with stat blocks, as well as brand new player options. Like for the Daggerheart version of Revelry at Lotus Island, there's a custom Daggerheart card, the Contagious Laughter spell, which I think you can see on the screen here, was included to complement this adventure specifically. So each adventure is paced for a full 4 to 6 hour session. Give or take depending on player interaction, of course. So it's a perfect game night for you and your players in a box.
What is actually really cool is how they're organized. The one-shots are grouped into seasons, each built around a unique campaign setting from Elderbrain's long-form campaign books. So this, for example, is Scepter of the Lightbringer, which contains plenty of info on the Dre city-states, which just happens to be where the first season of Mindscape One-Shots is located. Every subscriber gets a Realm Gazetteer, a full campaign setting guide, plus 12 monthly adventures across the year. It's a whole world to explore, one session at a time. Oh, and as Matt mentioned, the Daggerheart version of Revelry at Lotus Island. The subscription is built for D&D, but what's pretty cool is if you're playing Pathfinder 2E or Daggerheart, those modules are available as standalone purchases as well. Every adventure is fully VTT ready for Foundry VTT and for all D&D 5e modules, Roll20 included. Plus, you can choose from 3 different level ranges depending on where your party's at, scrubs through badass.
When you sign up, you also get a welcome package loaded with free adventure modules, dungeon maps, character sheets, bonus subclasses, monsters, magic items, oh, it keeps coming, and 3D printable miniature STLs for all you printable types out there. Plus, there's a loyalty XP system where you get to level up and unlock free modules within the actual site, discount codes, exclusive one-shots, physical long-form hardcover books, and, this might be a little crazy, options to be immortalized as an NPC in the one-shots based on your likeness. And more. It's pretty freaking nuts. But yeah, right now you can use code CRITROLL at mindscapeoneshots.com to get 30% off any subscription tier and their standalone Daggerheart adventure modules. But once again, only through May 31st, so hurry. A big thank you again to the folks at Elderbrain for sponsoring this GM Roundtable. Thank you. And I think it's time to move on to the next question here, which I will pull up a little. So we've talked about structure, we've talked about setup, we've talked about like the benefits of modules and such. As well as keeping the pace at the table. How do you handle combat in a time-limited session? This is always the part where games can drag, the part where things can end up stretching wide in ways you don't expect. For me, kind of to play a little bit to that unbeatable combat scenario, not as an example in a way, if a combat is dragging to a degree, you always have the option to end it early by having any sort of enemies either flee or give up or resort to conversation when they realize that things are turning against them, or conversely, if the player's beginning to lose, to be like, stop before any more of you die, and we'll take you to our leader, sort of a vibe. And that can kind of adjust what can be like a bit, if it turns into a slog, as well as the opportunity to have something more dangerous show up and then have that you gotta run moment too. Yeah. Those are some of the tools you can kind of pull from. What are some things that have helped you along with like moving combat forward or ending it quickly if it's going too long?
Well, not even to talk like an expert, I'd say from like earlier games at home, I have had moments where I'm like, oh, this kind of turned into a slog, and that has taught me that if there is some sort of a big adversary to deal with at the end, to really put some thought into not making it something that is too beefy for the party. I mean, unless I'm doing something where I am warning the players, like this is going to be nasty and people will die, which is not normally how I like to play, although I have. So I try to balance the thing that they are facing at the end to be a challenge, but not overwhelmingly so, I think. maybe I'm showing my hand too much. But if you've been going for 4 or 5 hours and some of the people at the table are parents even, or have to have an early morning for whatever reason, like you don't want to be dragging on and on and on.
Yeah.
So I try to make it, I think that there's like 3 to 5 rounds, sometimes depending on, again, it depends on how many players are in the game. You just get a feel as you go for, how much a round of combat takes in the system you're playing. And I think accordingly in advance. Like that's one area where I put in more thought and wing less.
I also enjoy for climactic battles that you fear might become a bit of a slog, thinking of how to add a puzzle element to it as kind of a release valve if it starts going long. If the way it's designed or the way that you've customized it ends up leading to that feeling of like, uh-oh, we got to leave here in an hour and this is just starting, then finding ways to have a player do damage to it and describing like, as you cleave through its armor, you see in the crack inside, there's a light blue pulsing glow, and it seems to glance worriedly and then back at you with anger. The player's like, there's something about this glow. What can we do? We have to break off the armor and see if we can get to the glow, where it becomes, it's still combat and there's still a challenge involved, but it doesn't have to be a do enough damage to defeat it scenario, more than let's creatively use the environment or use this knowledge to maybe either make it more vulnerable or even defeat it before its hit points get to a low point, but still make it climactic and dangerous. And you can even, in range with that, of making this puzzle element with the reveal of this possible alternative victory, increase the challenge rating or the damage it's doing, almost like in its desperation of showing its vulnerability. It's now coming at you even harder, which once again raises the stakes, but doesn't lengthen the duration of that combat.
I like those solutions way more than just being like, I make up the number. Like when I feel like the thing dies, it dies. I know there's a lot of DMs who will just be like, I don't even track the damage they do and whatever. I think that is very dishonest to your players.
That's wild to me. I respect to those that do.
Right.
River's rate for your table is great, but like to me it kind of robs the game aspect of it.
Yeah, and it's just like if someone crits on their smite and does 240 damage and it, ends the combat right there, I want that to be honest. I want the players to have those moments, right? I like the Nintendo idea of like, Samus hits Ridley to a point where there's a glow, all of a sudden a chest opens, right? Or Resident Evil, and it's like an eye appears, it mutates. I make sure on the other end of that, I always make sure that my players, I tell my players, I don't, some people might disagree with this, I don't mind if you're on your phone when we have 6 people at the table and, you don't have to be attentive at every second, as long as when you get to your turn, you know what you're doing and you're aware of like you don't have to go, well, what just happened here? Why is this person here and whatever. I just want to make sure, because I play with a lot of people who will, they'll go on their phone or they'll just be thinking a long time of what to do next. That for me is what takes up a lot of the time in my fights, is people just not being prepared. They're not thinking about, especially if they're doing a one-shot, they're typically playing a character they're unfamiliar with, so they don't know what they're going to do. So I respectfully say, make sure to be thinking about what you're doing so we can continue on while we're playing,
I don't mind unfamiliarity with the rules, but waiting until the very moment that it's your turn to go like, oh, okay, so what do I want to do? I just, in a friendly way, encourage everybody to be thinking about their moves.
Yeah, I mean, you're battling, for some folks, ADHD and things that they can't help, in which case you want to be supportive and facilitate. But if you have conversations with your players beforehand, like, because we're on limited time here, please be present, and at least aware of what's happening. You can also give incentives to be like, if you are prepared and ready to go, occasionally it might give you like a little damage bonus for being on top of it. Or conversely, if you know the players well and sometimes they react better to it, you can be like, yeah, if we get to your turn and you don't know what to do and you panic for a moment, that might mark a stress in your Daggerheart game.
That's what I do. Like I know my players enough to like jingle keys and be like, pay attention. Can you look at what's going on actually? But of course, with new players, you don't want to be that way, and you want to, just be. Yeah, I think having in-game incentives is always the best way to go about it. Because for me, that is the killer. Is just people, not being ready, and then I'm just there and I'm sitting and I'm like, thank you, but just remember next time. Just be ready for your turn, but I think a narrative way is always the best way of going forward.
You've also talked about it a little bit beforehand, but I want to get into the weeds on this, because this is something that I think most GMs, especially new GMs, have anxiety about, especially when we're running one-shots in limited time. how do you handle players going off of the prepared narrative? We've mentioned a little bit about ways we kind of nudge or try and gather attention, but occasionally it still happens. What are some of the ways that we've come upon these challenges and done so in a way that felt nice?
That felt nice. Okay. Oh, wow, that felt nice. Okay, for sure. I'm like Homer Simpson strangling my players.
Right. Which will happen.
Yeah, which will happen. I can't think of a specific. I'm like trying to. It happens all the time for me. It really does.
Well, I mean, if it's a one shot and if it's not like I joke about the Travis Willingham killing Santa thing ad nauseum, but thankfully that was like in the last moments of it, so we made it through the meat of it, and maybe that's why I felt confident to kill a beloved figure. Yeah. But I had another character like rip him away in a really fun, like narratively fulfilling and silly way. So you don't want to like punish players. We're all just playing a game together. Our job is not to be punishers. But when things happen in the meat of a game and someone's going off and I'm like, but we have to get to the beginning, the middle, and the end are waiting for us over there, then, there will be, punishment isn't the right word, but there will be challenges waiting for them. Like if someone's going to go off running into a direction I didn't anticipate, well, our job is to improvise a lot, so I'm sometimes improvise something bad over there that will start biting their butt or getting them trapped in a tar pit or what have you.
Right. Yeah, I think too, if you haven't established a lot of in-game world, like physical boundaries, maybe you're like, the tavern is this way, and they run the other way. You're like, oh, actually, the tavern was this way. There's like framing it in a different way. I did a Mad Max-esque world one shot once to see how that world would work, and I remember my friends were rage baiting me and trying to waste my time, and they went up like an apartment, and what I had happen was they opened a door, and this was like a vacant building, and a trap went off, and I was like, give me a dexterity saving throw, and it literally, the room exploded, and they were flown out of the window into the window of the new building. And to be like, oh, you're here, wow, holy cow. And a lot of people, don't have friends that get a lot of enjoyment from just trying to waste your time as a DM, but I think there are, I think you could seriously use
Don't
comedy.
Undermine their perspective that I think is very important in this scenario.
Where I'm sweating and I'm beat red.
Yep.
But I seriously think using comedy is a really good way of just like, okay, it's so on the nose, I'm clearly railroading you so that you don't waste time, but it's funny enough that they don't care, right? Like if I have a propane bomb go off in someone's empty apartment so it launches you into the new area, people are like, oh, haha, that's funny. Let's actually do what we need to,
I think that leans into the contract of the one shot, meaning part of the open discussion at the top of the game is going, hey guys, thanks for coming. This is all great fun. We have a limited time to play this. I've prepped a lot, but also I'm doing my best to get us through a really meaningful story in this short time. Let's all agree to try and not fuck with me too much, to try and break this thing that I've worked hard to make all of you. And if you get any cues of me trying to nudge you, don't fight me. Because I'm doing this for us all to have fun, and Jerry has to go.
And they from their phone, they're like, "What are you saying?" Like,
That's it. I absolutely agree, and it just goes right back to the beginning of managing expectations. But sometimes, you want your party. So here's Lotus Island. I'm going to use this map from Lotus Island, which is like a finite play space, right, with different locations on it. And you might want your party here, but Jerry continually is over here and insists on being there. Well, you could have people over here talking about here and saying you need to get back there. You can have some sort of an enemy that is going to grab that person up and drag them back. But you also don't want to stifle every single impulse. So give that player some time to figure out what it is they want to do. Not infinite time, but a little bit of time. And then if you're on a fast-moving train schedule, then you can think of things in advance, or you can improvise them on the fly of what is the thing that's going to drag Jerry back to the round.
A fun thing to do, and it's getting easier as players are being more pulled into the narrative elements. But you can ask a player at certain points, like what's either privately before the game if you want, or even the session, like what's something you've done that would be seen poorly by the populace, you know? And they'd be like, I broke this thing, or whatever. And you can be like, well, it's interesting. You're stuck caught in that memory as suddenly 2 guards come in from the door, and somebody's who looks very familiar is over there. That woman who you stole her, her purse from a week ago, she walks in and looks like she's looking for a face in the crowd. And he's like, guys, we gotta go. If you really need to move them along, try and think of a narrative character reason to kind of let them know you should probably move on, or probably go in that, or if they go too far off the beaten path to the edge of the other direction, you can be like, that person who fired you a couple weeks ago because you were sleeping with their daughter looks like they're over there building a new structure on the wall out there, and they're turning in your direction. What do? We go hide and go back to the, finding fun little winks and nods to the idea of like, okay, we got to keep this thing moving, but not breaking the fourth wall too heavily, And honestly, propane bomb into another window. If it's an awesome category.
Right. Yeah. And if you, like I said, if it's a one shot and it's on the nose and you can be fun, like without ruining people's immersion or their verisimilitude or whatever, then you can get away with stuff like that,
Absolutely.
right? As long as
also, not always, but sometimes, often even, these things can be mutable, changeable. So like, if you needed somebody to get item A or information A from here, but Jerry continually wants to go to this side of the island, there's sleight of hand involved. Like that information or that item they'll never know, can suddenly be over here instead, and suddenly the thing that was needed to click you forward on your train schedule happened. It just didn't happen the way you planned it.
Right. Yeah, I think a lot of new DMs get stuck up on that, where they're like, the rules that I arbitrarily made for my world can never be broken ever. And it's like, no, you can manipulate some of these things, especially if it's like, the fog of war, like people don't know yet that this is where this is located. This is where you can absolutely use that to your advantage.
And on a semi-related note too, like, you know this,
I don't know.
we both know this,
Too,
is you can plan stuff like that you just throw out. So like if you're on a schedule, and my players always surprise me. I don't know why I'm surprised, because we do this to you too, but like we'll take forever examining a chair, right?
Yeah.
And you're like, why are you spending so much time? You're spending 30 minutes talking about this fucking chair in the room. Go, move on. But players just do that. Like they're like, they'll deliberate, do I do this, do I do that? So there could have been a whole other encounter or combat or something that I thought would have been really cool, but I know now, like, you can have some of those and just be like, well, forget that. We just pull out a segment and they get to the end a little, or the next part a little bit faster.
A good thing to note as you're preparing for this purpose is, what's the important bit of information about this scene? What about this encounter or this location? What is necessary for the story to progress for this one shot? And just kind of isolate that. And then if you have to get rid of that scene, you still have the important piece of information that you can plug in elsewhere. They spend 30 minutes with this chair, and the important moment that was supposed to happen in the next sequence was them learning that the professor was actually the murderer. Maybe they find a letter taped under that chair from, a student saying,
So it was under the chair. That's what you're telling me.
And it was like,
and then you can omit that entire next sequence, but they still get the important bit of information, and they feel rewarded for spending 30 minutes looking at a fucking chair.
Oh man.
So finding those important narrative beats and isolating them so they're modular if you need to is also a very helpful tool to do that.
Yeah.
Interesting question. I think this doesn't come up too often in discussions here, but it does happen. Player death in a one-shot.
Oh, yeah.
It can be really impactful and epic in that final encounter and lead to a great denouement, but what happens if it happens earlier? What happens if, an hour and a half to 2 hours into this one-shot, one of your players is dead and they don't have a backup ready to go? You weren't expecting it to happen?
I was running Dragon of Icefire Peak, which comes from the starter set out of D&D 5th edition, and I never encouraged this, where I made my players' character sheets. But it was like, you can use pre-made characters sometimes, like that's not unheard of. And if you do that, like look online and just grab something that someone else has made. But I had spent so much time doing that and getting everyone together that I didn't make a backup character, and these guys don't know how to make a new character. It was the guy who was playing Muscle Man, funny enough, that we went through. There's a part in Dragon Ball Inspired Peak where you come across a dwarven statue holding a green gem, and he's looking down at, and that you narrate it, you have to narrate it, where he's looking down like this and he's smiling really evilly, and the essence coming out of this green gem is necrotic and nefarious, and he goes, I grab it. And it goes, okay, and you take, and they're level 1, right? So they cough hard, they die. I roll 1,000,000 damage. He dies. We have already taken so long to get here, and we are not making it to the end, that he said, almost like Toon Force, another muscle man walked in and goes, what happened to that guy? That is literally what we had to do. Because I couldn't explain to them how to make another character sheet, and I'm trying to run the game, so I can't be like, usually when someone dies, you're like, okay, you'll come back in an hour, right? Yeah. Hopefully less than that if it's a one-shot. But make a quick character on whatever, and we'll just throw you in next. But we were so, in that specific situation, I was like, fine, whatever, dude, like you're muscle man too, right? And I think you can get away with that in a one-shot, like it's fine.
Every table is different, every game is different, certainly every one-shot is different, and everyone has their opinion about what tabletop is, but it's like, it really is whatever you want it to be, and it can be Looney Tunes Muscle Man #2, or it can be a Chekhov play. It can be whatever you want it to be, as long as everyone agrees at the table.
Well, and everyone is having fun.
Yeah.
Which is the baseline of all of this, which is why if a player dies early, finding a way to not rob them of the rest of the fun and having them sit at the table while everyone else is engaging is the key. And like to that case, having them bring in a #2 clone is fine. Yeah. You could also have like the necrotic energy that killed them raises them as an undead immediately, and now the same character's there, but now they get to roleplay their character just a little slow, and now they get, how's the undead interpretation? How's this roleplay scene gonna happen? And be like, oh my God, you're back, are you? No, and that can be a fun, memorable moment where now the player gets to interpret their character as an undead for the rest of this encounter. Or conversely, maybe their ghost stays with them. The body is dead, they say their goodbyes, and then all of a sudden the GM, narrates like, but a spectral version of their face guides yours during their, eulogy, and it's like, what happened to me? Yeah. And suddenly like, now the ghost is following them along, and while they may not have the same physical interactions, they can still converse, they can still give information. Maybe you can improvise some rules for them haunting opponents and freaking them out, or in your midpoint break of the story where you all get like 10 minutes to snack and get ready, you can pull that player aside and be like, all right, what do you want to do with this, and how can I involve you? Because it's another thing too, unless you're on like a super, super time crunch, it's okay to take breaks, and it's okay to like take a moment during a module where things unexpectedly happen and check in with the players. Yeah. Both as a group or in another room. How many times have we had break moments in our home game back in the day where I'd pull one or two of you off into a different chamber to like take 5 minutes and talk about like what just happened, and
good shit.
How do you want to adjust it, or even do like a little mini role play session just one-on-one for that like side bit. Yep. And so like, don't be afraid to take breaks. Don't be afraid to like take a moment to reassess and retool your notes. You're not streaming this live, maybe, and you can, for your first time especially, and then take some time to refinagle what you've prepped to fit what things have happened in the game up to that point.
And like, I never encourage players to, because there's always kind of a sentiment too, like I want to trip up the DM. I really want to trip up. A one-shot is a great time to be like, boo, like what do I do? And like your players will they will think that's funny, right? It is totally fine if it's kind of like breaking the fourth wall a little bit, where it's like they do something or like someone dies, you roll the dice, you see the damage, there's that pause that you have behind the screen, and they're like, oh, what happened? And you go, what does your character look like if they're in 1,000,000 pieces against the wall? And like you have to stop and take a minute. I think the how loose a one-shot is allows for such memorable moments like that too. Absolutely. Where you don't have to be like, and you see the dust slow down as it like the fire illuminates. What are your last words that you have? Instead, you can be like, oh God, I have no idea what to do. We have 20 minutes left. Like, yeah. So I think, definitely one shot is you can be a lot more loose with it.
Definitely. Yeah, you may have one shot too, or like I said, I ran my 3-shot, which is like, I told everybody, you're gonna die. This place is awful. That's the fun of it. That's the joke. We might lose someone pretty early. I'm just letting you know, but like that's not most games, right? So you're the one in control. Even if you're using like something pre-made, like if maybe if you only have one night, don't put a green crystal that can absolutely murk a player like in the first hour of traversal in the game. Like save that for the end. If you're in, I know it's a different story if you're doing one game that leads off into future campaign, because like death and those unpredictable ebbs and flows to where everything is going. If it's a full campaign, there's time to recover. You know that there's promise of more later. You can find it, but for a one shot, if I bring it back to one shots, and you're entertaining your group for like 3 to 5 hours, probably you want all your players to make it to the end portion of the story to see what that challenge or that puzzle or that encounter or that debate is, rather than. But again, I don't want to yuck anybody's yum. Like if you want to run a game where people can absolutely step on a magical landmine in hour one, and everybody knows that it's that kind of thing, then game on.
Yeah. On the flip side of it, I think I add, if you pre-establish, it's a meat grind. That is when I'll add stuff like the deck of many things. I typically, in a normal campaign, I don't want it messing up my campaign as much as it really can, right? Yeah. Or like just out of nowhere, be like, oh, give me 20 gold and maybe your character's stuck inside a gem forever. In a one shot, that can be totally fine. It doesn't really matter. I have a lot of players who are like, can we do the deck of many things? And I'm like, yeah, I guess we can in a one shot, right? But I don't I like your characters enough right now that if, I don't want it to be. I think it'd be a funnier moment if you pull a card and like you end up dying or whatever it might happen. It's funny if that happens in a one shot, right? Than it does.
Yeah. So you also have the fun of like a B story of one of your players. Like you just keep cutting back to them in their soul gem or whatever their predicament is. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's like the highlights that I really like in a one shot as well. Especially if. You see a lot of stuff, and I'm sure Elderbrain has a lot of stuff like this as well, where you may not add it into a normal campaign, but a one-shot is really where, the consequences aren't incredibly awful because we're not playing this game we're not in the middle of a 6-month-long campaign. It might just be something that we're starting right now.
And here's a fun thing to mention, too. Sorry.
No.
Okay, we talk about one-shots transitioning into a campaign. Mm-hmm. You can also run one-shots mid-campaign. Where you want to take like a little break from your main running campaign after a big story beat, or somebody who's a player wants to take a swing at being a GM, but they're familiar with the world you've been playing in. You can very well like run new characters in a one-shot in the world tangentially to the story you've been running, and then see what kind of chaos comes out of that, the same level of insanity and wild buy-in and seat of your pants, kind of drive it like you stole it, one-shot energy. And then return to your campaign and perhaps consider some of the ramifications of that one shot now carry over into your current campaign. Much in the same way of like that gate that got destroyed and then caused it to be raided. Imagine playing this like emotional 1.5 year long narrative with these characters you've all invested in, then running a goofy one shot with a bunch of, kobolds that end up, causing a magical tower to explode and rain radioactive arcana upon this, region of the town. Coming back to the campaign 3 sessions in later, you keep hearing these stories about this like wild magic corrupted place now, and you go and investigate it and find this like broken wizard tower and these like this group of wild kobolds that have now become the warlords of the region. You're like, oh no, we did this. There's a lot of fun opportunities to tie that insanity back into your main story without like damaging the
Shout out to the Darrington Brigade.
Darrington Brigade's a very good example of that.
I think that's, to come across. Because like in Resident Evil 7, that kind of happens where it's like you walk into this house and all of a sudden you're like, there was a ghost squad here, and then you play the VHS tape and you are the people who are, the ghost investigation crew, whatever. And I think that's funny if you start a session and your players walk into, and see these kobolds. It could also be a thing where it's like you then go into a one-shot to see those kobolds gain that magic, and then you have to cut back to your regular campaign, right? And you have to fight the kobolds you just played as, and you're like, oh, this is the big, TTRPG shtick where everyone's human. You have to see the ramifications of, whatever. So now I have to fight the kobolds who do have a story and like a family, and like I played as these guys. That's a very fun.
Campaign 3, we kind of did it with Brennan, where we had a narrative where the players got to experience a bit of lost history that was like recorded within this arcane device. And so as they pulled out of they pulled into this like memory, this recorded arcane history. Then it went to Downfall, which was like a multi-episode retelling of a period during the Age of Arcanum and the Calamity. And so then all the events of that short-run series then became player knowledge when we returned to the campaign that informed their choices and where the story was going from there. And so yeah, there's a lot of really fun ways to kind of just, and even for GMs who experience burnout and need rest every now and then, if you're like, all right, I finished an arc, I need some time off, would any of you want to run a few one-shots? And you can run a few, you can have each players support your GMs. You can take any of these awesome one-shots that are available through Elderbrain and see if you can tailor them. Talk with your GM and be like, hey, I have this fun idea for this story and have this really cool module here. Could I run this one-shot either unrelated and just have a little bit of break time? Or could you think of a way that I could incorporate this into our current campaign somewhere else in the world that wouldn't break your lore? In which case, now the player gets to contribute to this story and gets to kind of build in this one-shot narrative that might, once again, come back into their main campaign. And that player feels now like they've benefited from and been rewarded for them running this one shot as it becomes, in some ways, into their main campaign when they return to it.
And then as the DM, you're like, oh, I can finally be a player. So I'm sure that, you can relate. And it gives you finally that freedom to be like, oh, I can concentrate on one character, one backstory, one thing. And that's a big, just being a player too, after DMing for so long is so, it's very nice to have.
It's
like
pretty great.
Yeah,
I'm not gonna lie.
Right?
I'm digging it.
But to that same point too, any modules, any pre-written one-shot modules, you can take as much or as little of that as you want to and tailor it to whatever you've already built or want to create out of it. You could follow it to a T, and it's a great plug and play, let's go, and just go with it as it's written. Or if you take a little time with it, you can make it your own across the board and just use bits and pieces if you want.
Yeah, I've used a lot of pre-made stuff, and I just take the parts that are the most exciting to me and focus on the parts that I think will excite one of my players.
Yeah. That's definitely, there's no other time I play more one-shots than when I come back from like Gen Con and I have like 40 new TTRPGs I want to play. And it's just to try to see how the systems are different, how they interact. And I'm such a guy who plays a lot of grim dark, kind of one-shots and everything, that it's fun to go into something that's so much lighter, that's so much, like Lotus Island Revelry at Lotus Island would be something I wouldn't come up with on my own. I'm not a very big Fae guy, and this one's like a lot, it's a little bit kookier, a little bit weirder, and that's stuff where, I would come back from like a convention and be like, oh, this is so out of my wheelhouse. It's fun to run something else that's a bit different for sure. Yeah.
No, it's. I hope this conversation has been helpful when it comes to running one-shots. This has been so fun chatting with you guys.
Great. Yeah.
But before we let you go, and both of you guys, we got to give one last huge thank you to Elderbrain, who we've been talking about, and their Mindscape one-shots for sponsoring today's episode, where we've gotten to chat about things that we all continue to learn from. I learn every time we get to have these conversations, which is wonderful. Mindscape, to remind you, is a monthly D&D one-shot subscription that delivers a complete, ready-to-run adventure to your inbox every month with custom NPCs, original monsters, gorgeous maps, new subclasses, spells, magic items, full VTT support for Foundry VTT and Roll20, and it all fits into a 4 to 6 hour one-shot session. No prep stress, just story and fun to enable the kinds of experience that we got to talk about tonight. So subscribers also get a Realm Gazetteer to set the world-building stage, plus 12 adventures across the year organized into themed seasons. Very easy to peruse and coordinate. And there's also the Welcome Package alone with free modules, character sheets, maps, subclasses, and bonus content. It's worth jumping in for. You'll enjoy it. So one more time, use code CRITROLL at mindscapeoneshots.com to get 30% off any subscription tier and their standalone Daggerheart Adventure module through May 31st. Thank you to Elderbrain for helping sponsor, make this happen. Thank you both so much for coming and chatting today. It's been so much fun.
It was great. It was a lab talking about the lab.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good time. And thank you all so much for joining us and watching. So good luck on your future one-shot endeavors. Run one-shots for your GMs out there, players, and good night.
Bye.